Welcome, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3's Black Ice 10.41. Now, I hear you all say, where's TRE, damn it? Where's Third Reich events? We want Third Reich events, and I hear you. Well, one, we did need to play. I mean, it's best to play all the way through, but we did need to play the basic Black Ice here to see sort of how things changed and feel before you start modifying it. You should have some idea of it. That's part of the holdup. Part of the holdup, quite honestly, is lots of stuff sort of going on with me. Not that anything's really bad or wrong or anything like that, but just some things I've been having to deal with the last few weeks. They're just taking up some time. And so, yeah, really not much work has been done on it. One of the major holdups still is I want to get back to, and I haven't done the detailed work of getting it working, of being able to have 8 brigade divisions. So we're going to, that's part of the holdup. And what the problem with that is it's starting to do things that I'm not technically comfortable, technical wise comfortable with. So where just some of the other stuff I am comfortable working with, so it's easier to do. So some of that. Now we've done a lot of little micromanaging, starting on the live stream, but a good reason, hey, to follow me on Twitch, or just make sure your bell notification's on. And so that you can catch me live. But we did all that, but no time has gone by on the clock until now. So we can see, okay, we've won in Bergen. I think we get Bergen. I think that's the last victory hex, and we've got them. There might be some remnant forces. Some units like these with the British flag and the French flag may stay around on the map once it surrenders. Okay, we've won here. St. Denzen, we've won up there. We're under attack down here as we're pushing it. Oh hell, look at. Uh-oh, we found the French army. Okay, so we can see here. I knew there was a bunch of stack here that was moving out. Okay, let's push here with this division just to make these guys uncomfortable. There are good reasons to push against hard targets as opposed to purely, flow through them where they aren't. Okay, there's definitely the thought of, yeah, we'll get Schweppenberg on this thing. The idea of, do you reinforce success or do you reinforce failure? Meaning, should we be pushing here where we already have an advantage of the battle and swing around, or do we push here where we don't have a very good advantage for the combat and just allow some of these other forces to push in? Yeah, I don't think, this is just not going so well at the moment. They do have home counties. That'll be a British unit, I'm pretty sure, and a French garrison. But I think that will be for the best. I do sort of wish we could do pinning attacks, specified as a sort of a lightweight attack. Okay, these guys are here. We're going to use sort of motorized infantry with an armored battalion. Not really a panzer division. And these guys will support the attacks. I don't want to leave that. We get to Bruges here. Okay. Battle of Lomme up here. Doing well. Drop tanks. We just got 200 range, 220 range. Increased to a lot of our fighter types. I think those are, yep, one and done. Right. Okay. What? I do want to keep progressing on our air units, our air capabilities. Twin engine bomb bay. Now we can do flying boat prototypes. There we go. And the Battle of Bergen won again. They're sort of retreating out of there. Yeah, they're getting hit hard in that counterattack. They're coming up to reinforce. Let's see about hitting that colonial unit there from France. I know it's sitting in some sort of swamp. Oh, it's an Utrecht. I think that was, yeah, it's swamp. Okay, Battle of Ardennes, very good. Okay, let's take some of the better shaped units. We'll have you walk around here. We'll move you forward to there. Oh, we want to move on Dome. Van Dome has been... He's supposed to be a punching deep into the rear, the enemy, but he's just been caught in counterattacks and having to fight those, and he has been hit hard with that. Okay. Okay, we're gonna leave. We're gonna leave this unit, which is just about wiped out. That unit, oh no, that's Van Thoma's unit. That unit, which still has some fight left in it, but we're gonna move this. Just because we may very well get counterattacks, but they're not gonna be really hard attacks, I do not think. Semi-motor tactics division, I want to swing you up around so you don't get counterattacked. Battle of Compiègne. Verdun. We won. Bruges, we're winning. We're going to make sure, no, this is going to push to there, just to make sure we keep pushing. A little worried about this counterattack on all these units stacked up here. You can sort of see here. Not that it's going to like defeat us, but it just could become a problem. So I'm been shifting forces, and then they can move back into the front line. Shifting forces to sort of deal with some of this. And I just decided to leave Holland until after the fall of France, and then of course we can come up and crush them. Okay, support submarines, increasing the range of our submarine operations. Support submarine, you know. Okay. A little bit of a talk here, just a short one. Underway replenishment at sea is, I would say, something of an art form, not just a science, a technological capability. And and basically, one of two things you need to do underway, which basically and is sort of specified in underway, but is basically not going into a port. Because if you have two floating objects, which could be submarines or boats or ships or whatever, out there, you either need to be in basically complete calm, which is sort of like a bay or a port. So you can, without necessarily, well, a lot of times in the history of shipping, they would resupply ships, not moving them next to a pier or a wharf. They were just out in the harbor, and they would use what was called, I keep stepping back in time and establishing things. I don't know if people like that or not. Hello, Sam, how you doing? So they'd have ships, moored out in the harbor, and they'd use what generally might be called lighters, but lighter boats, barges, whatever, that they would row out next to the ship and, move cargo up onto that. And they were doing that all through this period, loading and unloading, not at a wharf, a pier, a jetty, or any sort of terminology like that. A lot of stuff going in the Pacific. The Japanese would. It's just easier because it takes a lot of effort to maneuver a ship next to a pier, and easily things can go wrong with it. Easier to bring most of the supplies out to the ship, but that needs calm. But underway, which is sort of is the term that they use, but it's rather descriptive. But out at sea, it is theoretically possible to have two big ships, two big objects that you lash together, you tie together, that are floating, and they're just touching each other. But to do that, the problem is they first have to collide with each other, because you'll never get a just sort of barely touching and then together. So because the sea is moving, and so you can't, unless somehow you get these two ships, and it's difficulty, and you can do serious damage, like poke big holes in them. So unless you somehow do that, and then you have to get them, and they're not exactly parallel, exactly flat, so they'll still sort of be moving. It's just never good. So you can't just go out into the ocean here and stop two vessels and transfer goods, because the wind is moving them, the current is moving them, the waves, which may be either affected more by the wind or the current or whatever, is moving. So everything is moving here. So you can't both stop in normal sea conditions and stay stopped next to each other. It just, because either you start drifting apart or you start drifting together, basically. And so you can't stop. So you need to be underway. You need to be moving forward. It can be slow, but you need to be underway. Right. Now, what happens is if you go sort of underway and there's two of you and you're sort of next to each other, I know you can't see my hands, but there's sort of I forget the term for it. The way the water moves is it wants to collide you together. The way it moves out of the way and it sort of sucks you in. So if you've got two ships getting too close to each other, the way the water works is they want to crash each other next to each other. So then you have to actively, once you get close enough to it, to each other, you have to actively steer just a little bit to keep yourselves apart, to keep yourselves equal distance apart, if you know what I mean. So you're steering to separate, but not very hard, but just enough, and you're going forward that keeps you parallel. And that's a bit of a challenge. And so basically, the Navy that perfects this is really perfected during World War II, and that is the United States Navy. That is, on a large scale, the only Navy that I know that can do this. To the best of my knowledge, and I'm not saying, and you can show me movies of it, maybe a Japanese two ships transferring some stuff between them out at sea, or some British ships or something. Yeah, they can do it a bit, but to keep a fleet operating out at sea, you need to transfer a lot of stuff between every ship, not just like maybe you've seen often where they'll hook up. It could be ropes, but thick ropes or cables between two, and have a guy in a basket, maybe whether he's wounded or just in a standing basket, and transfer him between two ships. Or a small batch of supplies or movies or whatever. Yeah, they can do a little bit of it, but to really transfer everything you need to keep operating at sea between ships at a fleet-wide thing really is only done by the United States Navy. Britain is starting to get this towards the end of the war, and this is why, when asked, hey, the British want to come over and help you, they want to send a bunch of their Royal Navy to come in and help. You fight the Japanese now that Germany is done with the Navy part, at least for big ships, and or they've surrendered. It depends on the date, but I forget exactly. And Admiral Nimitz, who's basically in charge of the Pacific, you do have, and definitely in charge of it from a naval perspective, basically going, no thank you. Oh, but it's the Royal Navy and they got carriers and battleships. No thank you. Oh, but they're coming because politically they're coming. And he's going, no. How long can they stay at sea? Oh, well, they can stay, 28 days at sea before they have to turn around and go back to port. Huh? So, where's their ports? Oh. So basically they show up and stay for 5 days and go home because of the size and scale of the Pacific. Because, they had yet to take like Singapore. And so if you're operating, out here, the distances from ports and whatnot. And the British Navy, just because it very much had bases everywhere around the world, its Navy is actually sort of a short-range Navy compared to, because it is not a Pacific-based Navy like the U.S. and the Japanese fleet. They just didn't have, and they start getting this capability, and he's forced to take them and forced to use them. So he does. There are some operations because the Philippines are down here, and even once taken them, trying to operate off the Japanese coast is considerable. Hello, Eric. How you doing? And Aurora 4 is here, and Martin is here. Hello, gentlemen. Presume Aurora is a gentleman, just because most of my viewers are. So yeah, they have the Royal Navy eventually sort of gets into it, and they get a little better and better at it, and they sort of extend their cruising range a bit by stocking up on some more food and whatnot. And I know I've sort of gotten this on support submarines because I pictured something, and I'll get there in a moment. And that is, really, really, it's a difficult task on that. Okay, well, support submarines. Germany, I'm really thinking, analyzing it hard. Is maybe second best, but probably third or fourth best submariner nation in the world at this time. Now, by the end of the war, they've been pared back so much, so much of their talent is lost on the bottom of the ocean. I'm and I would say no fault to the talent of the sailors and skippers of the submarines. Just they were losing the technological war, and they were being sunk. I would have to say the U.S. is best on multiple counts. And again, a lot of it is because that they are set up as a Pacific-based submarine fleet, really long-range submarines. Most of the American submarines are much longer than most of the German submarines to be able to operate out at sea for a long time. So I have to put the Americans number one. Japan. Well, as commerce raiders, which is sort of the best operational use for submarines, Germany is probably best or second best. And towards the very end of the war, Germany is doing some wonderful things technologically wise. Really starting to build submarines as opposed to surface vessels that go under the water, because that's what most of the submarines of the period are. But Japan is also doing very good technical work, and can be seen in their rather effective, though they're not used and wouldn't have really done much, aircraft carrier submarines, but the technology and that they would work well. So Japan mostly falls down in that they do short production runs. Oh, we're building 4 of these or 3 of these, and then they'll build something, different submarines and different submarines with it. Germany and America are cranking them out, per standards type in hundreds of them, particularly like the Gato class for the Americans, maybe an occasional small production run of something else, and then once they've done, and including Germany, though Germany's working through more model changes, once get enough of a technological developments, then change things. So there's a few things that sort of keep Japan down a little bit, but Japan is probably second best, but it's close with Germany. And in there is still the Royal Navy and their submarines. They do a very good job, both. And I'm evaluating this as, how good the individual submarines were, how good the production of submarines were, how good the sailors were at it, and all of these things. So Germany's definitely in the top 4, might arguably be, and I know we have a lot of German fanboys, not that they're Nazis, but yay, Germany, that would put in, they may even think it's number 1, but no, they're really not. They might make it to number 2, and where's the Royal Navy in there that might push Germany down? I don't know. It's all tight, and it just depends on how you're evaluating things. Well, Germany did build a few what they called milch cows, and I'll read some of the chat here. I see a few people like Morton Koppel. Hello. Cruiser gun submarines. You're talking about the big French Surcouf. That's a French corsair or pirate. He was Surcouf, an actual person way back when. That had both a small little sort of a World War I style aircraft that they could assemble and take off on the Surcouf. And it had like 3 levels inside the main tube, and I'm not talking about the conning tower out levels. 3 levels inside, and then the big, huge pair of guns. Britain, I think, or was it the U.S., or both Britain and the U.S., did like a single gun sort of turret, big thing. But so these Milch cows were big sort of tubs of submarines. Germany never really went terribly long on submarines. The longer the submarine or ship it is versus its diameter, the bigger the turning radius is, on them. German submarines tend to be rather short. Not always. Where the American ones are longer submarines. That is primarily, again, because they're designed for the Pacific War. They operate in the Atlantic too, and can, but just it's not as maneuverable as a ship or submarine. So they build these sort of big tubby submarines that don't have any torpedo tubes on them. And I do think that they're called milch cows primarily because, and I was just picturing this, did they transfer torpedoes from one submarine to another out at sea? Hey, thanks for following. We really do appreciate that around here. Alexandria 4X, is that sort of like Aurora over? Thank you. Thank you, Arno, for suggesting it. And Nagara. Good to have Nagara here. So, I don't know if they were transferring torpedoes at sea. That would be, I guess, I was just picturing, how do you, because a torpedo you can't pick up and carry. I mean, theoretically, I don't know if you can, if you have enough, I mean, big heavy objects, if you have enough, a cradle and enough men, you could pick it up, yes. But you're not just going to pick it up and transfer it between ships. So you'd have to have cranes to get it up on the deck, float it onto some floaty thing, move it to the submarine over next to it, because you don't have the submarines banging into each other like I started in this discussion. Float it over to the other submarine and have a crane and pick it up and put it there. Yeah, that seems awfully complicated at sea. I mean, yeah, if you can sort of like convince, you know, Haiti or somebody to turn a blind eye to do some operations in a secluded, you know, a bay somewhere, sure, but to you know, like you might convince Spain to, you know, and I think they sort of did at times, do transfers of stuff outside of Spanish or inside of Spanish harbors, but outside of the view of most people. So there is some of that going on, but I can't really see them doing torpedoes. And maybe they do, and somebody knows, you know, out at sea. But, and like milch cows, milking them is because they would probably get near each other and run hoses between them that move water. Because, yeah, you desalinate some water, but you probably want more fresh water than your desalinization machines will do. Definitely moving fuel, and then as the main sort of thing, and then maybe you know, swinging up running some lines between conning towers and bringing over, you know, boxes of canned foods and things like that, sort of milking them for the fuel. But yeah, so it's more like, most of the time for the Germans, you come home once you've emptied and for most nations, once you've emptied your torpedo tubes, and the range is, you know, yeah, some of the shorter range submarines to get over to the, you know, Atlantic coast might really benefit from fuel just to get over there. But a lot of times it's just lurking fuel, you know, to stay around here and wait for the convoy and then come in and still be able to get home. But yeah, support submarines. Those are and so again, the difficulty and with all of these things is not just, oh, well, we just build a big tub of a submarine that has, you know, extra fuel tanks and supplies, and do that. Hey, that ain't such a big deal. But what really becomes the big deal is to have, generally speaking, your crews trained up and your systems designed, not just in the transport, you know, the submarine that's carrying all of the fuel, but did you design your submarine, you know, your operating submarines to effectively be able to get fuel transferred into them at sea? And it's you know, it's defining them from both sides and setting that up, and that is a trick, and, you know, a real hard trick to work out. So you need to have a lot. So there's a lot into these technologies that a lot of people just don't think about. So I want to say hello, Sad Pepe here. Are you collecting any relics from World War II? I mean, medals or anything? Yeah, I do have some stuff from World War II. Many years ago, as a young man, I gave up the idea of, because I'm always fascinated by the Nazis, of trying to collect German stuff because of fakes and counterfeits. I remember I bought a pair of SS rank badges, you know, SS on one side and that, and I took them to an expert that I knew. Yeah, I mean, just vaguely knew, but he was an expert and had a shop. And he goes, "Those are very nice fakes." I mean, that was basically, I mean, words very much to that effect. And this is, easily more than 30 years ago. I go, yeah, okay. And I believed him. He wasn't trying to get him off me or whatever, like, oh, well, I'll buy him off you for $5. You're trying to steal him from me. No, they're very nice fakes, because I've spent hundreds of dollars on uniform collection books and looked over them and looked at the stuff, and the backing, the sort of like a gunny sack type backing, all that looked right. All of that looked right. And I had bought some other fake stuff and some real stuff. And so I gave up German collecting. So I collect mostly firearms from like World War II, because they don't counterfeit those. Now, they might counterfeit, and they do at times, specialty, this is a rare something or other, and they've just sort of turned it into a rare thing from a common thing. Well, I don't try to go collect super rare things that people could make money off of counterfeiting. So, yeah, mostly firearms. I mean, I bought a pistol, German, marked, World War II, and it came in a holster, and it has a German World War II police badge, not a like a hat badge, whatever, a metal. I don't know. Yeah, might have, but it's the metal sort of German World War II. It's not like a policeman's badge, but it's the sort of with the wreath and all for the German police unit. And I have no idea whether that police badge that's on the thing is a real. I believe it is, but I have no idea whether it's a real World War II German's Ordnungspolizei badge or not. I bought it for the value of the firearm, and I got a decent deal at that. So whether the badge is real or not, I don't know. So, but yeah, I collect mostly firearms now, that kind of thing. And yes, same from YouTube. Let's see. And could Melchcows bring torpedo? Yeah, that's what I was just talking about. Yeah, I think it would be difficult getting torpedoes across. But they did not have, and which makes me think, and I don't know if somebody knows. World War II is such a huge subject. I'm not an expert on everything. The Melchcows, the submarines, did not have torpedo tubes on them, and there may be multiple reasons for not having torpedo tubes on it. But I would figure if you were going to transport torpedoes, you might as well make a few torpedo tubes just in case you get near an enemy vessel. But I don't think so. And hello, Jump 752 Bouncy. How are you doing? Good to have you here. So let's continue. Let's look at our technology here, because that's what sort of got us going. Okay, submarine snorkels, which we might get a bonus once we get the Netherlands to that, because the Dutch were the first ones to really make a practical use of submarines snorkels for submarines at sea. We'll do long range submarines. And here's the situation with that. Germany conquers the Netherlands, and they find in port, like on a dry dock or something, at least one vessel, Dutch submarine, in good shape, and I think that one had a snorkel attached to it, and several others. I know they try to get it's either one or very few Dutch submarines into service, and they're basically white elephants. They sort of operate them a little bit. They're in fairly good shape when they get a hold of them, but just everything's different about them. All of the parts and pieces are different than Germans and submarines, and they're just, they're used, but they're never like sent out into the Atlantic, just because maintenance and other things. It just never all that good of a, not the submarines were bad. It just is not the German standard. It's like if everything you need is used as a different screwdriver or a different wrench for something, but all the parts are different. It's just not good. But they get the plans and a few working examples of the snorkel. Well, the Germans go, cool, but we're already cranking out submarines, and we're doing great with them. Especially by the time they really start looking at this stuff. I mean, evaluating it in the Kriegsmarine submarine schools, not just actually getting it. They've already got, they've conquered France, and they're able to, before, this is in the early days before they've set up all the big submarine pens and whatnot. But they're sort of like, yeah, we're doing great out here. We're able to get out into the mid-Atlantic and sink a lot of British shipping. We can even get out, off Canada and sink a lot of British shipping. So we're doing great. And so we don't really need this right now. We just rather have more submarines than better submarines, because we just don't have enough submarines. And then things start getting a little bit of a problem with the United Kingdom, in that they start getting better and better at anti-submarine warfare. And so the Germans are starting to take a lot of losses. And, hey, now America's in it. We can now, do the second happy time and hang off the American coast and the Caribbean and whatnot, and sink a lot of vessels out there. So yeah, we don't need these snorkel submarines, and we can just sink a lot of vessels, and the Americans start getting better at anti-submarine warfare again, which of course they had to know that was going to happen. And so by the time that the Germans are really starting to think about putting on snorkels, and you basically, you can take a submarine back and start tearing it apart and building into a snorkel onto it, but it's not a practical or good thing. I don't know that I have a most prized World War II item, Arno. Nothing I can particularly point to. But, it's a good question. But I don't know that I really do have like a most pride. A lot of interesting things, but I'm going to save a lot of stuff once I build my studio, once I get moved, and once whatnot, and I can talk about and show off things. And we'll do that someday, but I don't know I don't know, but I always get a feeling anxiety when I come across SS stuff. Yeah, SS stuff particularly is some of the most counterfeited stuff, and especially nowadays. See, like the badge I was talking to you, I bought back into the 1980s, and but now there's so much stuff counterfeited. Well, and even a lot of stuff that was almost sort of made on some of the same machinery, but people who know can tell that there's been slight changes in the manufacturing process and supply sources. But yeah, so there's more fake than real. And my best advice, if somebody really wants to collect something like SS stuff, or even just German stuff in general, one, if you want to collect it, and you're going to go, try to find the stuff yourself, just know that you're going to be burned. You're going to buy stuff, spend money on it, real money on it, and it's going to be fake, and either you're going to just throw that shit away or mark it as fake and you've lost your money, or you're going to be as corrupt as other people and try to sell it to other unsuspecting individuals. That's going to happen. It's just going to happen. Or two, you go to very high-end dealers who have a good reputation and who value their reputation and who are willing to fully buy back at the original price you bought your item if you think it's fake. And so, because they would a proper high-end dealer who wants to keep his reputation would rather go, oh, you think these things are fake, or somebody else thinks they're fake, they may end up going, well, they might be fake, or no, we think they're real, we'll buy them back from you at the price we sold them to you. So unless they're willing to do that and have a reputation for doing that, I wouldn't go near them unless you're willing to know that you're going to be burned at some point at collecting the stuff. So I do not collect firearms or anything like that that has a value. I got, and I am still maybe reasonably good on African uniforms that I can tell fake from real. But from the Bush Wars in the 60s and 70s, 80s, mostly 60s and 70s. I have a collection of uniforms from Africa. But mostly I collect firearms, and nothing that is so rare or hard to find that somebody wants to counterfeit it, put fake stamping on it or make it look like somebody's personal weapon or something like that. I just stay away from those things. And so I'm fairly good with firearms and knowing what's going on. So yes, Schutzstaffel is the stormtroopers. Well, that's SA is Sturmabteilung. SS is Schutzstaffel, which is like protection squad or something. You're a god whopper. How you doing? SA is Sturmabteilung. Okay, you're going to attack into there because we want to cut off any retreating forces from Belgium. Underway, replenishing. Just look. Oh, the Schnorkel. The story of the Schnorkel. Let's finish that. And so, basically, it's not a practical thing to just install snorkels onto already made submarines. It is best to build them that way as you're building out the submarine, in a practical sense, from everything that I understand about them. Now, the snorkel, and so Germany really starts only looking at building submarines with snorkels, and they only sort of do it on a limited basis. I don't quite want to say prototypes because it's a bit more than that, but it's still sort of limited basis. Late-ish in the war, when it's already too late to really affect anything. And so they just keep like, hey, things are good enough. We don't need them. We don't need them. Oh, shit, we need them. Now, what the snorkel does, at least mostly, does not allow you to... okay, gonna keep back. Submarines are noted normally for going faster on the surface than below the ocean. That is not so much the case with modern submarines, but submarines back then. It's for two reasons. One, once you go below the ocean, you have all that conning tower and even the deck all creates drag, so it slows up the submarine as it goes through the water. But two, the biggest reason is that it goes slower is that they're running under electrical engines. And to try to run an electrical engine as fast as you run trying to go as fast through the water as you do the diesel engines on the top, you will run your batteries down so fast because it gets exponentially harder and harder to shove something through the water because of resistance as you're going faster. So the submarines need to move slower under the water because of the electrical engines and running down the batteries. The snorkel allows you to pop up a snorkel and run just below the water. I know you sort of know this, but on your diesel engines and go zoom. And what a snorkel can readily be spotted in calm conditions, so it wouldn't work so well in the Mediterranean, from like looking from just about any sort of source. It creates a wake. It's a fairly big thing up there, and yeah, you might get close-ish with it, but you're going to be spotted. And so what it really does for you in the case of, and if you notice, very few nations use snorkels nowadays, even the diesel electrics, I think some of them do, is to allows you to do the long distance elements under the water when you don't think there's any enemy around, because a snorkel is exponentially smaller to see than a surface submarine, meaning you can see both of them, but it's so much smaller. So, aircraft flying patrols trying to spot a snorkel versus spotting a submarine on the surface is going to be that much harder. aircraft, surface-based, and other-based radars is going to be so much harder to pick up that radar return from the snorkel, if they can at all, versus a surface submarine. So what it does is it allows you to do the long-distance elements and not be caught mostly. I mean, if when they're coming in and out of some place like this, and we know that they're patrolling right here, they're probably going to still spot a few snorkeled submarines. It's not a, guarantee, but it is a more reasonable thing. Once you're sort of out in the big open, it's much harder to spot them. The problem the Germans found with them is that they were using them in the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean has lots of waves. This is why when I think it was Sir Francis Drake gets around here and comes out here, and man, this is a calm ocean. This is a peaceful ocean. This is a Pacific Ocean. That's sort of what peaceful means in Spanish or Latin or whatever. And so there's lots of waves. Well, every time a wave would come, the sort of floaty bit in the snorkel would go up and make a seal so that water doesn't come in, and that would create overpressure in the submarine. So it's like, boom, boom, boom. I know I'm making a bit more noise, but it was like, so your ears would pop. The pressure would build up in that submarine as every single wave would hit it. There would be, because you're both doing an intake and an exhaust for the airs going through that snorkel. So that's sort of some of the tricky thing. It isn't just like we think of a snorkel from swimming and it goes up above the water. You have to have an exhaust coming out, because that's part of the whole thing. Is you have to build, like I say, you have to build these submarines for it. You have to take the diesel engine exhaust, pipe it up through that snorkel, and you also have to have clean air intake coming in through that snorkel into the submarine, and maybe even trying to pump it in. I'm not sure if they're pumping it in, have a pump, or just letting it naturally flow. I don't know that detail, but I do know that it just builds up pressure waves as every single wave. And the German submariners just hate the snorkel. It just makes living on that submarine while the snorkel is in use in most conditions. I'm not even talking stormy conditions. In most conditions in the Atlantic, there is sort of a way around it, is of course to come almost up to the surface and have that snorkel sitting way high into the air. But then again, of course, it's much easier to spot. Basically having a flagpole without a flag going across the ocean. But if you're trying to keep it somewhat low down, you're not going to have it operate. Hello, Toy Jet. How you doing? Also, somebody gives false positive radar because, yeah, absolutely, radar shape, Alexandria. It's just, it's a very good idea. It's just in practice, it has its drawbacks. Not that I absolutely think the Germans should have, once they got that technology understood from the Dutch, should have immediately designed a new submarine and put that into production line use. It would have extended the effectiveness of submarines, but to the point that, especially around mid-ish, late-ish war, and being able to around major convoys, they're spotting the submerged submarines early on, because it's actually sort of hard for the sonar, especially the active sonar, but even the inactive, because it sounds like another ship. The German submariners early on would go after convoy attacks actually on the surface, and you go use their speed and come in amongst those convoys and fire out their torpedoes off, and then get the hell out all on the surface at night. Because they were hard targets to see, and there weren't that many escorts, and even there were some merchant vessels that had guns mounted on them and such. But the likelihood of hitting a relatively small target. Oh, and they'd also sort of be sort of surface, but sort of the idea of nobody on the deck, and sort of the main deck awash. So it's just sort of the conning tower is open and whatnot, and so it's just sort of mostly, on the surface, but not overly exposed, and, come in trimmed low, as they would call it. and come in there and operate fast and be hard targets and getting in and out. And that worked for a little while, but everything gets better and better and better. And so that they're even nailing pretty quickly submarines approaching under the water before they even get close enough to the convoys to effectively strike at them later in the war. So the snorkel won't help there even, but it would help. It would extend the life and make things. But yeah, absolutely, until they really need it. And I'll just call you Rye Barbar. Rye Barber, I guess. I don't know. Sorry. And you don't normally know that you need the snorkel until, oh, there's an airplane diving at you with bombs, and it's already too late. So yeah. It's just the idea that the snorkels, I mean, again, I am not saying the snorkels were a bad idea or weren't going to be practical. I think they would have been practical and were a good idea. It's just they're not, a Wunderwaffe, a super weapon that's going to make us invulnerable and we're going to win everything. No, it's just a good practical idea that has its limitations. Gets too rough. Well, hey, if the weather's too rough, there may not, if enough storms, even if there are aircraft still flying, they're not, have good visibility ranges. And it's harder to pick up a submarine in rough weather. So you just surface, you deal with the waves as you go along and whatnot. So, it's a good idea. It works. I would have very much advocated using them, but they needed to be used early enough to be somewhat effective in affecting the outcome of the war. Because the submarine, I mean, we can look at tactical uses of the submarine. Say, one of the things that Dönitz really objected to was, because it was working fairly well at the time, was recalling basically all of the submarines that were operating out of the Atlantic to get off of to support the invasion of Norway. And yeah, having a bunch of German submarines out here, and I think they did take out some ships. I don't remember the details. But, having them out here, that's a tactical use of the submarine to support naval landings and, convoy patrols and escorts and whatnot. That's a tactical outcome use of submarine. But the commerce rating element of submarines is purely a strategical operation. Their attacks on convoys are a tactical operation, but for the outcome of the war, it's not like that they're trying to stop supplies from getting to a particular place or stop the movement of troops to a particular port or something like that. It's just to sink enough of the enemy's ships to make their life uncomfortable. I think it's, in theory, possible to maybe sink enough British ships to get them to surrender for starvation things, but not really. I don't think that's a goal that's ever really practical. But it is a goal to make Britain's life so difficult that, along with everything else, whether it's bombings, invasions, or because you're putting so much of your navy and your shipping just to keep Britain alive that they can't get enough shipping to bring more units or supplies to North Africa, that allows you to win in North Africa or something like that. But it's just a strategic use weapon. Thanks, Arno. Well, everybody out there, we're going to keep the live stream going, but we're going to end this episode. For those watching later on YouTube, I want to thank you for watching. I really do appreciate that. See you next time for more, yes, even more Hearts of Iron.